Jimmy Lee 3-2 choppers. Today we're gonna assemble one of our Redneck springers. I'm gonna show you all the steps that we use. So this assembly is gonna be a raw assembly. So what I mean by raw is we're still mocking up the bike. So we're gonna build the springer raw. I'm not gonna use blue Loctite. I'm not gonna use protective coatings like our leather straps that we would use if we had finish on here, powder coat or chrome. This is all just raw steel. We're basically just putting this springer together so we can keep mocking the bike up. So the first thing I like to do is I like to take the rear section of the springer. I like to put it in the vise, tighten it down so it's holding like this, legs out. So I can do all my work right here.
And you have soft jaws too.
And I've got soft jaws inside not to scar up the steel. Again, it's raw, so we'll go back over all the steel. When we take this back apart for final assembly, we'll go over everything, look for any nicks and things like that, clean that stuff up before we send it out for final finishes. So the first thing, you can see all the parts here. We've got the springs, the outers and inners. We've got the stem, the top nuts. When you buy a springer from us, this is basically what it comes with. You've got your front section, the rods that go for the front section are right here. You've got your top tree. You've got your rockers.
Hold on a second.
What'd you do?
Oh, I just lowered it. I was trying to get the rods, and this is fine. I mean, this is just part of filming. So there's the rods again. I didn't have the picture of the rods when you were talking about them. So only one rod's in.
Yeah, so I've got one rod in. I'm going to show you how we put the other rods in. We've got the all our springers. All you need is a 3/8 drive ratchet to put them together. You see that? All the settings are for 3/8 ratchet on all the hardware. So you'll see that when we start putting it together. Top bolts also. So like I said, the first thing I like to do is I like to put the springer in the vise. Some of the prefab on this is, so you've got the rockers. These are the lower rockers. I like to prefab. I tap the brass fittings in.
The oil light brass.
The oil light. These are oil light brass fittings. They actually come with the springer when you buy the springer. So I like to tap these in. I use a little hand drill, chuck, and I have a little 1/2-inch hone. And I like to, when I tap them in, I like to run that hone through, make sure there's no burrs, real clean. I run them through both sides. That's a really nice clean fit. So when you go to put the clevis bolt in, it slides right in, and you don't have any issues with binding. It makes the assembly a lot nicer that way.
You can use a 1/2-inch drill bit. You just get a better, more precise hone with an actual hone.
Yes.
Drill bit, but don't use power on them. Do it by hand.
Yeah, do it by hand. So the first thing you do, these rockers are set up so that one side is a 3/4 inch hole, the other side's a 5/8 hole, and they're both counterbore on the outside. So you make sure that the outside goes to the outside. So basically, this slides right in here.
Hey, show them before you put that in there. Show them the little lock screw.
Okay.
It's a very important
So
part of the springers.
in our 3/2 Redneck springers, if you look at the let me grab an axle. So if you look at the axle, you'll see this. Can you see that?
Yeah, let's see. Let me zoom in.
You'll see this ridge here. It's a groove cut out in the base of the axle. So the axle slides in. When it sits in, it basically is sitting in like that. And you see this little hole right here. That's an 832 threaded hole. And so what that has is a set screw that goes in, and that set screw drives right into that groove, and that will keep the axle from ever backing out. Even if it came loose, it won't back out. And if you look at the other side, the axle bolt, it's basically set up the same way. It's set up the same way, so it's got the deal. So you can see that sits right in, that drops in, and then that hole lines right up with that slot.
Butterfingers.
And Butterfingers will always be dropping stuff.
So something also to take note is when you, if you have an existing Redneck springer, if you ever go to take it apart, you have to remove the set screws. You will not be able to get your rocker bolts out or your axle out if you don't remove those set screws. And we have too many people calling us because they have basically taken their a screwdriver and a hammer and tried to hammer them out and basically damage all your bolts and risk damaging the legs and the rockers because you didn't remove that little set screw. So it's very important.
He's talking about here's the bottom clevis for that bolt for the bottom of the legs, and you'll see there's that hole. So that's another set hole. That's another 832 set screw that goes in there, and that holds in that axle. That's what we're talking about.
Well, it holds in the rocker
holds in
bolt.
the clevis bolt.
Yeah, the clevis.
So the clevis bolt is right here. The clevis bolt goes in, it threads in, and then you can see it lines up with that hole. Okay, so I'll put that back.
All right, so let's get to the assembly now.
Okay, so again, like I said, outside to outside. So you slip that sucker in there, and again, like I said, I'm not using any Loctite on these, just because we're still in raw. So that goes in there, that pops in there. Take your ratchet, set that in there. That one needs a little tap. Hold on, time out.
So what you're going to end up doing here is you're only gonna bump it in.
Yeah, and I like to use a little something to protect the finish, you know.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get it to get through the secondary brass.
And when you tighten these up on mock-up, you're just going to bump it.
And of course, this one's going to be stubborn.
And this happens.
Yeah. Don't fret it. Just, there it goes. There it goes. And I don't over tighten these. Just make sure you got good rotation. Just like that. Okay, so that one's in. And then you've got the outside again. Hopefully this one will be a little easier. That sucker slides in there, line up that hole.
These rockers only go in one way. You have to put the counter bore out to the outside so that you can't get them in wrong.
Right. Well, you can put them in backwards.
Well, right, but if you keep the counter bore to the outside, you can't put them in wrong.
Right. Okay, so that's
that one went in real nice. So
yeah, so that's pretty much the rockers in the back legs. Pretty easy. On final assembly, then you would come into those holes again and put the little 832 set screws in the bottom, and that would hold that bolt in. So you'd put some on final assembly. You'd put some blue Loctite on that. Put that in. Put that set screw in, and that thing is not coming out. So that's a nice little touch right there.